So we have sound. I think, let me just quickly go to YouTube. So if there's anyone yet, let me quickly go to YouTube. Right, I am in YouTube. Right, so before I start today's stream, there is something. I normally have a story or something that I start before I start with the show. We have quite a good show today. We have two contributors. Returning to the show is Daniel Hofmeister. It's day one contributor, and today we'll also be joined by Ntsapo. But before we go into that specific aspect of the show, last night I actually was watching the South African game. So I was watching the game, and guess where I was watching it? I was watching it in an undisclosed mall. And in this mall, I saw a number of South Africans from all colors and creeds coming together to watch the South African versus Italy game. And it was interesting because for once, or these moments when the Boks are playing, we get a sense of feeling that there is a common goal, there's a sense of unity among South Africans. But the moment that game is finished, all of us go into different directions. So we all cheer when a try is scored. We all moan when something happened, when we don't agree to the ref. We are all sad when a player is injured. So we have this common issue that we want to work in our favor. And if it works in our favor, we are happy for a week, and we look forward to the Boks playing another week. And it raised the interesting So there's something wrong with this damn mic. Sometimes, every time I switch from one place to another, it sometimes just die. So I will have to look into this mic and really do something about it. But for now, I just have to work with this particular mic. Now, the first segment, the first thing that we're going to discuss today is this particular conversation, and I want you guys to participate in it. Leave a comment in the chat, and I will respond to it. So this confirms something that I've been feeling. So I've been feeling that the money that I used to have 1 or 2 years ago is not as much as is currently. So the 100 rand are not going as far as it has been going for years. So when I saw this particular report this week, it was quite interesting to me. And the report says that South Africans significantly poorer than the average person in the world. So South Africa is poor. We are poorer than the average person in the world. Now, I don't know what that means, or what that means for you guys, but this is what said, and I will read through it now. I just have a comment in the chat, and I just want to quickly respond to that comment. Will be with you now. This mic is going to get so I cannot switch screens or anything. So the moment I switch screen, then it dies. Yeah. I have to set it up properly, but like I said, I don't have now the time to do it. So I was talking about this particular report, and the report is about us getting poorer in South Africa. And this meant, as South Africans, as we getting poorer, that there was a number of things that people indicated. It started showing data that for the past couple of years, that we have significantly getting poorer compared to the rest, compared to the rest of the world. And it shows that our economy currently is not growing. The World Bank shows that it was 15% of the GDP in 2023 compared to the 40% for China, 30% for India, and 22% for Russia. Now that's our partners in BRICS. So we are doing really not as well as other BRICS partners. And I've looked at other parts of this report, and what the other parts of this report is indicating, especially if they start breaking it down by quarter, is that some provinces are actually growing much quicker than other provinces. And some of the provinces that is growing the slowest is Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and the Northwest. So those are the provinces that is currently growing as a negative growth rate, and we are not even growing at a full percent. We are 0 point something. So it's not a surprise then that the majority of South Africans are poor. So there is something that has to be done so that our economy grows. Now, there's a story that is linked to this. I'm starting with this because there is a specific story linked to this particular story. And that specific story is with regards to how foreign nationals are being treated at public institutions in South Africa. So for those of you who does not know what is happening, in Joburg, Operation Dudula, I think that's Dudula, are blocking foreign nationals from accessing the clinics. And I spoke to Danielle about it, and I asked Danielle what she has to say about it. So one of the questions that I asked Danielle was what does she makes of this particular question, of this particular issue that is currently happening. And this is what Danielle had to say.
I don't think it's either or. I think that we are absolutely being exploited for political gain by parties like Gauteng Mkhwanazi's, but I think the rhetoric that his party employs also taps into something deeper, which is that South Africans are suffering. The cost of living currently is unbearable, has been unbearable. People are buying food on credit. They are skipping out on meals. They are cutting out on the most basic essentials just to survive. And for many of those people, the bulk of which are the poor and the working class, there is no visible way out of this hardship, and it becomes easier, more emotionally accessible to turn on someone who lives next door than it is to hold government structures accountable. Now, that said, I think that we need to be honest with ourselves as we're having this conversation. And I'm going to say something now that is potentially controversial. And that is that South Africa, as a nation state with geographical borders, with limited infrastructure, cannot be a home for all. And that's not me being cruel, that's me trying to be realistic and pragmatic. I think that there is a sense among South Africans that we are running out of resources. And if we don't find ways, or a way, to balance care for our neighbors while also meeting the urgent needs of South African citizens, we are going to deepen instability and deepen violence for everyone. Now, that said, I'm not trying to rationalize xenophobia. I'm not trying to excuse it at all. I'm just asking us to consider what are the material conditions that allow xenophobic movements to thrive. So the poor and working class people don't need more moral chastisement from the middle class, from us, who benefit from relative privilege. They don't need us looking down on them and how they decide to handle issues or make life better for themselves. I think what they need from us is more solidarity, more allyship. They also need a government that shows up for them, that hears what their concerns are and meets them. So I think we need to recognize that scapegoating migrants, whether those migrants are African or even Western, is a distraction from what the real enemy is, which is corruption, austerity measures, and elite impunity.
So there's a number of takeaways from Danielle's first contribution. And I don't want to speak over, but I want to highlight something. And when she started talking about what is currently and how do we make sense of what is currently happening, something that she said stood out to me. Is actually two things. So the first is that this particular reality deepens to a ground level of instability. And she talks about and poses a really important question: what must we consider when it comes to the material conditions of xenophobia? Now, what material conditions means is that what causes xenophobia at a day-to-day basis, and as she aptly explains in the beginning, is that there is this cost of living that has increased, and South Africans is currently feeling it. Now, interestingly, and this is the material conditions and the structural nature of this, is that many South Africans are living in circumstances that is not ideal, and they're struggling on a day-to-day basis to get out of it. So that's a fact. But then we also have a number of South Africans who lives in not even a first world country. They live like in holiday resorts, and they have the majority of wealth in their hands. Now, with that being said, having so much money and so much wealth, you get this disproportionate wealth distribution in South Africa, which is not a good thing. And that is kind of the structural and material conditions. Now, what it reminded me was someone who gave an explanation of that in the 1960s already, and that was Frans Fanon with his book, The Wretched of the Earth. So there's a whole chapter on violence, and people, I would suggest that you go into it and you read that particular section so much, because it explains a lot. So what I'm currently reading is Marx's work. I'm started reading, and I just finished the Communist Manifesto. And his explanation in the Communist Manifesto is so it's almost like he wrote from the modern context and not in the time that he's speaking. Now, I'm not a communist. I normally tell people you can place me kind of quasi-communist, but I'm not communist. I'm more pragmatist. I try to solve problems, and whatever method gives me the best answers, I'll apply that. So I'm more quasi than anything. But I'm bringing these two books and these two texts so that if you want to learn a bit more and you want to read more, then they give certain answers to the question already. And I think it's time that we revisit some of that conversations. One of the other questions that I asked Daniel was, what do you think of this particular blockade, and how can we make sense of it in terms of constitutionality? And this is what Daniel had to say.
So I think that the blockade and the expulsion of foreign nationals from accessing our healthcare facilities is a constitutional violation and a human tragedy. But again, I also don't think that we can be talking about morality in abstract terms. Our healthcare facilities are collapsing. Clinics are understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. The problem is not foreign nationals accessing care. The problem is that government hasn't adequately capacitated and funded the system adequately for anyone. So yeah, we can't condone the cruelty of denying medical care to migrants, especially not those fleeing poverty or violence. But I also think that we cannot ignore the lived realities of South African citizens who feel invisible unless they resort to violence. And I think it's easy from a middle-class position to condemn and to condemn them with moral superiority. But when someone can't afford electricity or food, or when their child is turned away from a school or a clinic because there's no space available for them, frustration boils over and it finds its target in the most vulnerable person, the most vulnerable group. So we need to reject cruelty. And we also, at the same time, need to demand structural accountability. Like, healthcare needs serious investment. The education sector, which is also rife with xenophobic violence, or xenophobic sentiment rather, also needs urgent transformation. But right now, with the economy underperforming and government capacity failing, I don't think it's useful for us to pretend our values alone will fix these problems. There has to be a balance between our principles and what is currently feasible.
One of the things that stood out in Danielle's response is we cannot speak about morality in abstract terms. So what I take from that is that we are quick, and she pointed out, we are quick to say that what South Africans are doing is wrong. I condemn it, she condemns it, all of us condemn it. But there's the other side to morality that we don't look, and that is the government's failure to actually improve the lives of people. And I've said this so many times on this channel. Our constitution, one of the fundamental values and rights is human dignity. So one of the things that we have to start thinking about is that, yes, we as South Africans have a responsibility to our neighbors, but the government have a bigger responsibility, especially when they collect tax, to address our needs on a daily basis. And that gap that I've talked about between the absolute, I can't even describe the amount of wealth that those people have, and I cannot imagine the poverty that other people have. That gap needs to change. I also asked Danielle another question: who is to blame? What is at the
I think that we are absolutely missing the real problem. I think that you and I can agree that the healthcare crisis is not about migrants, it's about state failure, right? But there is an article that was published in the BD Live 3 days ago that I quickly want to quote, and it says, South Africa's economy is 37% smaller than it should be. We've potentially lost 5 trillion rand in tax revenue since 2010. And that is money that could have been used to fund and transform schools, clinics, and hospitals, and is now just gone. So knowing that there is an exorbitant amount of money that has been lost to corruption and mismanagement, South Africans are rightfully enraged. But it's difficult to unleash that anger. Not difficult, and perhaps difficult, but also unclear how to unleash that anger onto the entity that most deserves it, that is most responsible, which is government. I think that for many South Africans, government feels like this abstract, untouchable, inaccessible concept. But they're still sitting with that rage of being cheated, of being betrayed, and it needs to go somewhere. So now we're seeing a redirection of that rage onto the nearest face that many associate with scarcity, which in this case is the migrant. Now, I want to add something that complicates things, or at least for myself, it complicates it. While scapegoating is wrong, particularly scapegoating of a very vulnerable group of people, it is inexcusable. It is not born in a vacuum. As I said earlier, people are exhausted. People are trying and struggling to survive. And when our systems collapse or appear on the brink of collapse, that drive for survival becomes competitive, becomes violent. And so the poor are not our enemy, but they are reacting to decades of, again, betrayal and manipulation and exploitation and being gaslit by our government. The real problem is poor governance and economic neglect. right? And until we name that clearly, I think name it clearly and also address it meaningfully, I think that the cycle of blame will continue, and it will become more dangerous and much more vicious.
So I agree with Danielle. Um, the problem in South Africa is a level of poor governance, and there is a level of economic neglect. So recently, I was not in Cape Town for some time, so I went home and I had a really good conversation with one of my good friends, and that question was regards to why did the South African economy stop growing? And there was a big conversation in the early 90s, early 2000s about which economic policy works the best for us. And one of those economic policies that was so much criticized was the gear policy, growth, employment, and redistribution. But it seems that even though there was so much critique about that policy and the economic drive of Asgisa that later joined GEAR was actually what we needed for South Africa, because we had really good growth until the removal of Mbeki. So Mbeki, an economist, had a different view when it comes to the economy and how politics integrate. And I think it's time. So we have this national dialogues that is currently taking place. One of the central questions that we have to put forward: do we need a new economic policy that is going to address many of the shortcomings that we're currently facing? But there was a one final question that I have to that I asked Danielle, because it yeah. So the mic is back. So the final question that I gave Danielle to respond to is actually at the heart of the debate currently in the public healthcare facility: is who is going to pay for the NHI? And the question that I asked Danielle is, would the NHI address the current situation that we are facing in South Africa? And this is what Danielle had to say.
I think the NHI, in theory, is about justice, universal access to healthcare. But, a good idea implemented in a broken system, I think, can do far more harm than good. If we introduce the NHI without addressing the current challenges, which are staff shortages, infrastructural collapse, the exclusion of the most vulnerable groups in our society, I think it's going to fail. It has to fail. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, state-led transformation, that the kind of state-led transformation that we need, it's not going to happen soon. Confidence in government is low, business confidence is down as well, investment is slow. And I don't want to get into what Trump's tariff is threatening to do to our economy. What we need, I believe, is not just good policy. I think we have that more or less, but we need implementation capacity. I think we need to be funding our healthcare systems properly, adequately, before we can expand it equitably to everyone. And I also think that, crucially, the NHI must include migrant communities, but that exclusion can't just be on policy paper. It needs to be felt and realized within our hospitals and our clinics, especially in the rural and urban poor areas where I think tensions are the highest. So yeah, I think we need to be finding a balance. We cannot afford to be too idealistic, nor can we surrender our values. I think South Africa needs a migration framework that is structured, that is compassionate and realistic. I think that we need to care for our neighbors, but not at the expense of our collapsing institutions. I think we need to be fighting for the poor, South African or not, but we need to do so without assuming moral superiority.
So one of the things that that stood out in Danielle's response, and what made me think quite a bit, was that and I haven't seen this conversation, and it is something that she pointed to, and now makes me think a lot. The NHI must include migrant communities. I've looked at the debates currently when it comes to the NHI, and there was not specific mention made to migrant communities. Now, the reason why there is not specific mentions made to migrant communities is because they are already included constitutionally. Constitutionally, it says that everyone has the right. But what Danielle points out is that it's more complex. Everyone has this particular right. But when there is burden on a failing public health care system and people are pressed, then you might just press poor people into to such an extent that they are competing, and you find the othering, and then you will see violence escalate to the point where it's currently at. So does the NHI prevent future type of violence when it comes to migrant communities? And I don't think much attention has been given to it. So anyone who is listening to this, who is in the public healthcare sector, who does research on it, I think it's an important conversation to have. So anyone who would like to give more a contribution with regards to migrant communities and the NHI and how they are going to be protected, that would be an interesting conversation. Danielle, once again, thank you so much. You're always a star in terms of your responses, and your responses is always so well thought through. So thank you so much. We will most probably hear from Danielle next week with another interesting topic. Now, I'm slightly going to shift gears, but not completely. It's still the same on the same topic. So the one thing that we can take from this conversation so far is that something needs to happen. New parties, new organizations, new policies, new frameworks, more money needs to be given to address this particular problem that we currently have. So there's a slow decay of society and the institutions and infrastructure that we're currently facing. So with that being said, I am in a moment going to call Nsapo, and we're going to have a conversation about something that is pertinent and that happened recently. So I know that you guys have seen this particular report in the media, and this report was about General Mkhwanazi's press briefing. So I think most of you, or everyone in South Africa, you must have seen this on social media, have some level of awareness of this particular topic. So there was particular responses when it came to General Mkhwanazi's press briefing, and one of the things that stood out was the ANC's lack of urgency to address the allegations made against the Minister of Police. So the ANC came out, and they are still in the mode of wanting to deliberate on the allegations. So it seems that there is no level of real urgency coming from the ANC. So, with that being said, I'm going to call Nsapo. I'm going to call her on WhatsApp, and there was a couple of questions, that I have on Nsapo, and we are going to discuss this now. So, if you have a question at this point, you can also put it in the chat, and we will respond to the questions. So let me quickly call Nsapo. I'll put her on the microphone, and I will introduce Nsapo. So Nsapo is the leader of the newly founded VUCA organization. I don't want to make an announcement yet, but in the coming days, just watch the space. You will hear a lot about VUCA. So I have Nsapo now on the phone, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her the first question that I have, and it is with regards to Nsapo, the ANC's response. Why do you think the ANC currently is? They seem quite unhappy with what General Mkhwanazi actually exposed. What's your response, and what's your views on the matter?
Good afternoon, Jacob, and thank you so much for having me. So my name, as you briefly introduced me, I'm the co-founder of VUCA, which is to wake up as a wake-up call to South Africans. So let me start by saying this. What we are really witnessing in South Africa right now is a moral crisis. It's a leadership crisis more than just about policing. And we see that the public has been betrayed. And what General Mkhwanazi did really was telling the truth in a system that's built to silence and to punish those who are courageous to come forward and report such instances. Now, to answer your question is that, in honesty, truth has consequences. And we've seen time and time again that the ANC would rather protect its comrades than doing what is actually right with the citizens of South Africa. So what General Mkhwanazi did is that he exposed the rot that implicates individuals, but also the system, that network of criminals that is thriving under this current political protection. And the discomfort from the ANC is not about not General Mkhwanazi not following the protocol, but they are being forced now to account on what many citizens have been thinking about and sort of being proven correct.
And Nsapo, thank you so much for that response. Now the one thing that stood out for me, especially in the response, do you think this is a kind of arrogance? Because it seemed quite arrogant, or is it tone deafness from the side of the ANC and their leadership?
Yeah, I think it's both. The arrogance of the ANC thinking that actions don't have consequences. And it's tone deaf because of the impact of what the allegations are doing to the future of South Africa. So the arrogance from the ANC comes really from thinking that South Africans owe them their freedom, and therefore they can carry themselves whichever way, and that they are untouchable. And the tone deafness is them having no regard of their responsibility towards South Africans, despite being humbled by South Africans last year. And what General Mkhwanazi really did was that he, the support that he's getting has brought to light what we are whispering in our corridors, in the public, and so on. So the ANC is both arrogant, but also it's both tone deaf to what is actually happening in the country.
Now, it's quite a surprise for me that they're tone deaf, especially after they are, like Fikile said, they are 40% party, and yet they don't seem to respond with urgency to it.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you, does it seems that General Mkhwanazi exposed a criminal network. Did this criminal network surprise you in any way?
Look, not at all. It didn't surprise me at all because I think for the past 2 decades, we've seen tenders being awarded to ANC-linked individuals by virtue of association, and not so much about whether or not they can get the job done. And most of these tenderpreneurs fail to deliver on their work, and there are no consequences. And then what we are seeing is that there is a court case after court case that is implicating senior ANC officials in such scandals. So it's something that's been in the making for too long. And when you have leaders who care more about consuming than building anything, you'll find them implicated in making easy money. And what is surprising is knowing that this scandal will also be swept under the carpet with no consequences at all. But what we are seeing now is that the walls are closing in on the ANC, and I don't think the leaders care much about the people losing faith in them as a governing party, despite their, poor performance last year.
All right. So, with this, since you say that they do not seem to care, especially the leadership do not seems to care, do you think that would affect them the same way that the state captured it, and that they might be surprised again?
Look, this is probably the final collapse of the ANC, and by that I mean that the state capture report or the whole process of the state capture commission showed us the cracks and the warning signs that there is something that is wrong. As a result, even when the state capture report was delivered, there has been no one who has been held to account. Even though also the 2024 general elections showed that the organization is crumbling, this shows us that the public no longer trusts the ANC as a political organization. And these allegations by General Mkhwanazi shed light to a deeper systemic rot that continues to fail South Africans. Because how can lawmakers be entangled with lawbreakers, such as cartels and drug syndicates, even though these are allegations? The same drugs that are killing the young people of South Africa. So as citizens, we should be really concerned if our public officials are feeding or are in close proximity with who feed our children drugs.
A final question for you. It seems, like you said, the walls are closing in on the ANC. Do you think this is a turning point? And is there opportunities for other groups to actually address some of the challenges that not only you have pointed out, but also Danielle, in terms of the failing public institutions, the poverty, the economy? Do you think this is an opportunity for where other interest groups and organizations can now step in and say, if the ANC doesn't want to do it, we are here?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are standing at crossroads. And what's happening in South Africa regarding to crime as well is exposing more than just gangsters and syndicates. It's exposing the failures of those who were handed, such a powerful legacy and an organization. And instead of them honoring the promise of a better life for all, they chose to enrich themselves and, their friends as a direct expense to South Africans. So Ivuka is formed as a civic political organization built to catalyze the democratic renewal, constitutional reform, and also organizing communities for change. So the opportunities that we have seen in the political space, the first one is that there is a generational leadership transition, right? So the leaders that inherited the power, the political power, have not really delivered. And people are no longer scared to say this. So there is a rising generation that is not captured or even loyal to party, and it's looking for impact, accountability, and also integrity. And so many of us are stepping forward because we refuse to inherit this kind of brokenness without actually doing anything to fix it. And then the second opportunity that we are seeing is that there is a shift in people themselves, in South Africans themselves. So a constituency changes. So corruption and crime have robbed an entire generation of the ability to live meaningful and productive lives. I mean, when we started, we spoke about how, it's so, like, South Africans are the poorest, than the average. And I think that speaks to how we have been robbed of getting decent jobs that can be able to provide, right? There is an entire generation of people who are above 35, who have never been in a place of work, who don't have the tax money, who have never earned a salary, despite the ANC having promised that they would have a better life under democracy. So we've got a youth that is being numbed by drugs, right? Educators that are disillusioned, professionals that are burnt out. And last year, what we also saw is that more than 11 million people didn't show up to go and vote. Now, this is not because these people don't care, but because they've stopped believing that anything can change. That's not just apathy, but it's an opportunity of people that are waiting for something new and something that is real. And then the last opportunity that we are seeing is a paradigm shift. And we need to stop waiting for better politicians, right? The truth is that many of them are enablers of crime. And we cannot keep demanding people, who have failed us to somehow become the solution that we are looking for. We have to change the game. And that means changing how we see politics, how we engage with politics, and who we allow ourselves to lead. And I think as a leadership practitioner, I believe that leadership starts with self. So even us as Ivuka, we believe that change starts with self, and then you then mobilize or organize around the same people that are saying we actually need the change. So we have to show up differently and start reclaiming politics as something that actually belongs.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you guys didn't miss the last part of Nsapo. The mic cut out. What you actually said is that there is an opportunity for other spaces. Nsapo, thank you so much for joining the Sunday show, and hope I will see you and hear from you in the coming episodes and live streams. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Eko, for having me. Have a great one.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yes, bye.
So ladies and gentlemen, that is most probably one of the best responses to the current problem that we are facing in South Africa. If we want to do something, we cannot rely just on the ANC or other political parties. There is space for civic organizations, civic political organizations, new businesses that addresses social entrepreneurship interventions. It's time for us to do something about it. And I want to take you again to this particular, the way we started. South Africans currently is on average the poorest person in the world. And this is not by accident, this is by design. And this design is how the South African economy and government and civil society are set up. So the average South African is the poorest in the world. So I don't know if this is something to be prideful about, but I know this is a crisis and we have to do something about it. We definitely have to do something about it. it's not that we are chasing for rich and wealth. It means if the average South African with its wealth inequality is poorer than the average person in the world, then there is greater unseen levels of poverty in our communities that people are not willing to talk about. So it's definitely something time to do something about it. Now, this brought me kind of the end of the stream and the contributions. So if there's any contributions from your side, please let me know. I will stay online for another 5 minutes or so, but give me your contributions. Please put it in the chat, and I will respond to it, and I will read it for everyone online. So please let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about South Africa being the poorest in the world. How do you feel about it? I don't feel good about it. I opened this show is that we are sitting and watching South Africa, feeling like we are winners, but when you see reports like this, then you cannot feel like a winner at this particular point. Let me see what you guys have been saying and putting in the chat. All right, so there is no comments in the chat. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our Sunday show. So I will be back next week again with Sunday show, and I will look at some of the things that we are experiencing in South Africa, but also some of the most newsworthy stories of that week. And I'm not just chasing newsworthy stories. I also look at some of the conversations that we need to have. And I think this week we had two really good conversations. Danielle and Nsapo, brilliant contributions, and I think you can go and rewatch this episode, listen to their contributions, and take a lot away from those contributions. There is some stories that has come to my attention that I want to look at in the coming days. Stuff like Floyd Shiwambo, but I will see what is really happening there. There is developments on an international front, especially with Trump's tariffs, so that's also important. Danielle have mentioned it. My families are still, many of them are still farm workers, so they most probably will be affected. Especially, I know my cousin is working on a citrus farm, and one of the industries that is going to be hit by Trump's tariffs is the citrus industry. So I don't know what is going to happen to my cousin and his family. He has a young child at this particular moment, so I don't know what is going to happen. So there's also developments on the African continent. There is interesting developments in Sudan and even in the Democratic Republic of Congo that links to kind of today's story. But we will have a much deeper look at those stories in the coming weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. May God bless, and I will see you in next episode of the Sunday show.